Hey guys, welcome back to Mystifying Miracles, and today I have a great story for you. If you're new to the channel, I search out true stories every week that involve miracles. Sometimes they're mysterious, sometimes they involve angels, lots of different stuff. So if that sounds interesting, listen along and we're going to dive right in. Today, our story is about a woman whose name is Pam Bales. And Pam had grown up exploring the White Mountains of New Hampshire. She loved to do it as a hobby, but she also did it for her work. You see, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right. She worked with the Pemigewasset Valley Search and Rescue Team, and she had worked for them for about 5 years or so when this event took place. And the particular day that is involved here is October 17th of 2010. She had checked the forecast. She had actually been waiting to do the trip at the right moment, when the forecast looks good, a bunch of different factors. And on October 17th, this was the day. So she packed all of her things. Since she worked with search and rescue, she was always taking extra precautions, so to speak. So she packed extra warm clothes, things like that. She even put her itinerary on a piece of paper and left it on the dash of her car. That way, if, there was an emergency, people would know the route she took, when she did it, her whole itinerary, so they'd be able to find her if something were to happen. Now, it's important to note about Mount Washington, there in New Hampshire. In general, there are very unpredictable weather patterns, so sometimes it can be hard to hike this particular one. And all in all, the story stated that in the last 150 years, this mountain had taken over 150 lives. So it was no easy task, we'll just put it that way. So that morning, like I said, took all the extra precaution, and she was feeling extra confident. So why not? She got up extra early and set out. At about 8:30 a.m., she noticed that she was still below the tree line of the mountain, and she stopped for a quick break and to take a quick selfie. She continued on, and about 9 a.m., she noticed the weather getting quite colder. The wind was picking up, that whole deal. She just decided to snap another selfie with her camera. And also at that time, it was about 24 degrees Fahrenheit, actual temperature was, so it probably felt much colder. The winds, they were blowing over 50 miles per hour. Pam continued on, and about 10:30 a.m., she finally reached the tree line. And it stated that this was at the junction of Jewel and Gulf Side trails. And by that point, it was very blistery cold. So she decided to put on more layers of clothing from her pack. And she even, as she walked along the little ridge along that place, she kind of pondered, maybe I do need to turn back. Today's not the day to reach the summit, perhaps. But shortly thereafter, having that thought, she noticed footprints. She went over to investigate the prints, and she noticed they came from sneakers, which that's very odd because, first of all, it was a no-no to hike in sneakers, especially on this particular mountain. You really needed hiking boots. Pam continued on for a little more way till about 11 a.m., another 30 minutes or so. And at that point, she was like, all right, this is getting out of hand weather-wise, so I think I need to abort the plan and just probably head back. And at this point, the gusty winds and the fog and the snow, it's all blowing in her face. And at this point, too, there was heavy sleet starting to fall. But there were still those footprints. And she noticed the tracks took a sharp left not too far up ahead. So she thought, oh my gosh, if somebody's trapped or lost, I can't leave them not here in this weather. I have to at least investigate, make sure they're okay. So she decides to follow the tracks. And as she's going along, she's screaming out, hello, seeing if anybody's screaming back for help or anything. And she even took out her rescue whistle out of her pack and was blowing that thing like crazy, but never heard a thing. It was when she went another 20 or 30 yards around that corner where the prints were that there he was. She saw a man sitting on rime-covered boulders. She called out to him, but he didn't answer. He wasn't moving. So she walked over towards him and she looked at him and he was out of it. His face, it was like glazed over. It was pale and waxy looking. And she knew right away this man was hypothermic and he needed treatment like ASAP. Pam began to strip off the man's clothes down to his underwear and t-shirt because they were frozen to him, basically. And that probably was no easy task because she was doing it all alone with the weather like it was. And he was dead weight. He couldn't move. So she's trying to maneuver him around to take it all off. So that probably took some time to do all that. And then she looked him over to see if he had any injuries or anything like that, cuts. Nothing. He looked fine other than the hypothermia thing. And she couldn't find anything with his name on it. So she just kind of talked to him and said, look, I'm going to call you John. She quickly put dry layers of clothing on him from her pack. And then it said she took out a bivouac. I don't know if I'm saying that one right either. Bivouac sack from her pack, and she placed it around his whole body, and it basically entombed him to try to get his body temperature up. And then she also took out a bunch of heat packs that she had, and she placed them in like critical areas, like underneath his armpits, around his torso, one on each side of his neck, just to try to get that blood flow warm and going. She even took out some electrolyte packets, poured them into her thermos of cocoa, and gently, I don't know how this worked either, her doing all this by herself, but, holding the thermos with one hand, trying to hold his head and get him to swallow some of the drink. But she did. She got a little bit down him, so that was good. And the story says it was an hour before John could move or talk or anything like that. And when he did talk, it was very slow and hard to understand him. He was slurring like crazy. But Pam understood a little bit, and John told Pam that morning when he awoke, he lived in Maine, the temperature had been 60 degrees Fahrenheit, so things seemed fine for a hike. In fact, he also told Pam that he had done this trail many times before, so he didn't see a problem. Some point during his hike, he lost his way, and that's when the weather had picked up and gotten worse, and he didn't know what to do. He just sat down on these boulders. Now, at this point, John's body is warming up, which is great. But bad thing is he's very lethargic, so he has no energy. He can barely function. So Pam, she at one point stared straight into his eyes and said, "We have to go now." Pam, now she also had spikes on her shoes, which helped, for traction during her hikes. She took those off, put them on John's sneakers because he was almost dead weight. He could, he was moving slow, and there was ice everywhere, sleet. He could slip and fall. So it was best that he put those on. And also, because of him being so lethargic, his body's exhausted, so he wants to fall asleep. But due to that, Pam had to be very forceful with him, and she wasn't a forceful lady. But in order to get him moving and so they could get out of there, she had to be like very direct and forceful and telling him, get up, we're going, that kind of thing. They started to go back the same way they had come, and it was inch by inch because of John not being able to move very fast. But it was a blessing because Pam could still see the holes in the snow that her trekking poles had made when she had come the way up. So she was using that as a guide to follow because the wind and snow, all the weather was just so crazy and blowing in their faces. You couldn't see hardly in front of you. So she just looked down and watched for those little holes. There was quite a few times where he just wanted to fall asleep. And to prevent him from doing that, she would sing Elvis songs, and just to try to keep him awake and vibrant. Despite that, though, it worked for the most part, but there was one point where John just dropped down in the snow. And then he began to curl up in the fetal position, almost as if he's given up. He can't take another step. And that's when she got down in his face and she said, "That's not an option, John. Get up now." To her relief, he actually started getting back up. They had been walking about a half a mile or so when they finally reached the Jewel Trail. There, it was quite darker because the canopy of trees was kind of blocking out a lot of the light. So Pam just took out one of her little headlamps, strapped that on, and then they had a way to see. Now, this whole time, she's kind of fearful because she's thinking, oh my goodness, what if he drops down in the snow again or gives up? Or what am I going to do? It's just me. So all she knew to do was keep singing to the man. So she kept singing the songs and she kept encouraging him on the way. And that was working. Well, as you can imagine, when they finally got to the trailhead at about 6 p.m., they were both physically, mentally, emotionally exhausted, depleted. But Pam grabbed all the frozen clothing that he had on and she threw it in her car, started it up, cranked the heat full blast, and she wanted to get those dry as possible. And in the meantime, while they waited, she asked John, why didn't you pack extra food, clothes? But the only response she got was, I just borrowed it. So because of his lethargy and, his slow because of the hypothermia that took place, I assume he was talking about the clothes that he had, that he borrowed. But that's pretty much all he said. When the clothes were finally thawed out enough, she pulled them out, gave them back to John, and she asked him one more question. She was like, I don't get it. Like, did you not check the forecast before you came out? He didn't answer. All he did was kindly thank her. He got into his vehicle and he took off. That was it. And then poor Pam's just standing there because it's dark now. She's standing there in the darkness by her car and she's just thinking, what in the world just happened? Well, a week goes by and a man named Alan Clark, he was the president of the rescue and search team that Pam worked for. He got a letter in the mail, and of course he gave that letter to Pam. So I'm going to read to you what that letter said. I hope this reaches the right group of rescuers. This is hard to do, but must try. Part of my therapy. I want to remain anonymous, but I was called John. On Sunday, October 17th, I went up to my favorite trail, Jewel, to end my life. Weather was to be bad. Thought no one else would be there. I was dressed to go quickly. Next thing I knew, this lady was talking to me, changing my clothes, talking to me, giving me food, making me warmer, and she kept talking and calling me John. And I let her. Finally learned her name was Pam. Conditions were horrible, and I said to leave me and get going. But she wouldn't. Got me up and had me stay right behind her, still talking. I followed, but I did think about running off. She couldn't see me. But I wanted to take only my life, not anybody else. And I think she would have tried to find me. The entire time she treated me with care, compassion, authority, confidence, and the impression that I mattered. With all that has been going wrong in my life, I didn't matter to me, but I did to Pam. She probably thought I was the stupidest hiker dressed like I was, but I was never put down in any way. Chewed out, yes, in a kind way. Maybe I wasn't meant to die yet. I somehow still mattered in life. I became very embarrassed later on and never really thanked her properly. If she is an example of your organization, you must be the best group around. Please accept this small offer of appreciation for her effort to save me, way beyond the limits of safety. No did not seem in her mind. I'm getting help with my mental needs, and they will also help me find a job. And I have temporary housing. I have a new direction thanks to wonderful people like yourselves. I got your name from the pack patch and her bumper sticker. My deepest thanks, John. So this man, John, he included a small donation in the letter too, as a way of an appreciation. That's just amazing. Obviously, after Pam read the letter, she was so deeply moved. And it's been quite a few years since 2010, but apparently around that area, Pam became sort of a legend, so to speak. Like, people know her, like, as part of the rescue team and what she did for this guy. So yeah, she just became known as the Legend of White Mountain is what it was. And it was a title that she earned, obviously, but she didn't particularly want it. She didn't like to be noticed for things like that, but I guess it is what it is, talk around the town and whatnot. To this day, though, Pam still likes to imagine that this guy, who she called John, is still out there somewhere in the world and that he's enjoying his second chance at life. I just thought that a very cool story. Here's this woman that's, just going to go out for a hike, what she loves to do. And instead, she ends up saving somebody's life. I was doing the last video and my silly camera, the battery ran out. So, sorry about that, guys, but I was pretty much wrapping up. I was just stating that, Pam saved this guy's life in probably more ways than one. And I just found that a really cool story. You just never know, like from day to day, what God's going to put in your path. I just find that really, really cool. I hope you guys do too. Please remember to like and subscribe to the video, to the channel if you do enjoy this content. I do appreciate you guys so, so very much. And other than that, I will see you guys for the next one. And I won't let my battery run out. Bye.